Welcome to another video. Today we're going to be going through the Q3 2021 report for the Jamaica Broilers Group, ticker JBG. So we're going to be doing is going through that report, just kind of seeing what the results have shown. We're going to briefly look at the last annual report for 2021, and then we're going to go through, typically as we would through a full stock review and an analysis, talk about some of the things that we see. Now, this type of review is not going to be the same in depth as the stock analysis and review. And so there are a few things that you won't see us do in this video that we normally do. And the reason why we're doing this is that there are so many quarterly reports that come out. We won't be able to spend the same amount of time to go through it. But it's definitely important as one of the reports that we recommend that our audience goes through when they're trying to assess a company. We wanted to start integrating this video into our content so that you can see what are some of the things you may look for and how you may go about doing research into a company if you're trying to assess and determine whether or not they're right for your investment portfolio. So before I go any further, I want to say that anything that I discuss here is for education, entertainment, and illustrative purposes only, and should not be construed as professional financial advice, solicitation, or recommendation to buy any security. So we are a Bible-based investment community, so I'm going to open with a word of prayer. Lord, we thank you so much for this day. I pray, Lord, that as we go through this process, you'll give us knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Be with us, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. All right, so let us go to the Jamaica Stock Exchange website. And we're looking at the Jamaica Broilers Group. As I mentioned before, that ticker is JBG. That's what you're seeing here. And we're seeing the last traded or the closing price as at today. So if you want to know how to find these companies, you can go to this page. The link will be in the description. You can pretty much search for the company on the right. Just type in the company name, just in case you're not aware of the ticker. In this case, we do, right? So I could just type in JBG here or type in Jamaica, and once I start to spell it out, it will show me a list here. Once I select it, it brings me onto this screen. And this screen just gives me a summary of this company. So I can see a chart here. I can see, closing, opening prices, bid, ask. That's the best of each. And then I have some links here that will point me to, price history of the company, any news that have come out about the company, quarterly financials, annual reports, audited financials, etc. And then below that, I have, some highlights here. So I have the week to date, so month to date, quarter to date, etc. Importantly, I have the shares outstanding here and the market value of those shares. That's simply the units here multiplied by the price as at that day. Then this value will change accordingly. Then below that, now sometimes you may see the data here, not all the time, but this will give me a summary of the company in terms of how it's done each quarter and each year in terms of earnings. So you see Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4 here. And we can use this to see just from a high level how the company has performed over the last few years. So if I know nothing about this company, I can come here and see just how their performance has been. All right, below that, we'll have now the same data that's here, that's presented in number form. So I can see how they've done through each Q3, and Q3 is what we're going to be looking at here. And we're actually going to be seeing what we might be able to project for Q4. We're not actually going to do a projection, and I'm just going to talk about it briefly. And from here we have corporate actions. So if it is that any dividends have been announced, you'd see that here. In this case, it only goes back to 2020, unfortunately. So we're not able to see as far back as what we're seeing here in terms of 2015. And below that, you just see now a summary of the same news that you would access on this side here. So that's an overview of this page. So if I'm interested to see the quarterly report, I will come to this page, click on quarterly financials, actually open that in a new tab. And right here, I'm able to see all the quarterly financials that have come out as far back as I think the company has been listed, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the third quarter for 2022, and we're going to look, at the same quarter for 2021 to see how they might have improved or declined over that period. So these are the two that we're going to look at, and we're going to use the annual report to fill in any details that we may need to know, right? Hopefully you're with me. If you have any questions, just post them in the comments. I'll try to get to it after I've finished my review. So let's start with an overview of who Jamaica Broilers is. And for me, I go to the annual report to find out that information. So that's where I am. I'm in the annual report. Let me actually zoom out and go to the top of that document so you can see it. So I'm in the 2021 annual report, and you can just use any of the annual reports that you're able to locate. It should start with an overview of the company. We're not going to go in depth into the annual report, as I said, because that's not the purpose of this video. But if you look out for a stock review and analysis for Jamaica Broilers, it will have a full annual report review. All right. So it says the company was founded in 1958 and is publicly listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. Having solidified their operations at home, the Jamaica Broilers Group Limited expanded its borders through the establishment of significant operations in the United States and Haiti, as well as supporting businesses in other Caribbean territories. Right, so just from this, it's telling us that they have operations in Jamaica, United States, and Haiti, and it says other Caribbean territories, right? So you want to think about that context when you're assessing this company. It says now a multinational entity, the group is best described as a vertically integrated poultry business with operations spanning the full gamut of poultry rearing as well as a means of food production. This includes breeder flocks, hatcheries, feed mills, grow out operations, processing facilities, shipping and logistics services, and more. So their mission statement and core values reference the Judeo-Christian principles and govern the way that they do business, right? So that speaks to the values of the company, and they place great value on serving their community and committing to do so with truth, fairness, and building of goodwill, right? So in an eggshell, they raise chickens, but ultimately they're in it to impact lives, right? So that speaks to, the company, who they're about, and it gives us an understanding of what it is that they do. So they leverage their strategic advantage to help farmers and agricultural dealers to establish their own business in the field, and basically they're in the business of building businesses, right? Okay, so that gives us an overview. So let's go to the Q3 for 2021 first, right? So this would be last year this time, and we're gonna see where they're coming from to where they are now, right? So it's showing us here an overview of their operations in Jamaica, US, and Haiti. So we mentioned 3 main operations. So it's showing in Jamaica billion how they've done, right? So Jamaica is leading, then US, then Haiti. It speaks to the highlights here. So profit before tax is 2.5 billion. That's up 66% at that point. Revenue up 2%. Total assets is up 18% to 47 billion, and earnings per stock, that's earnings per share, that per share outstanding, that's up 53% as at this point. All right. So in terms of this this section here, we typically like to go through these to see if there's anything that is highlighted in terms of whether, highlights to the performance or anything that is upcoming for the company. All right. So let's see what this is saying here in case we can glean anything from it. Right. So the group would have produced a profit. We mentioned that before, up 66% over the prior year, and they recorded profits attributable to shareholders of 1.8 billion. Right. Group revenues for the 9 months amounted to 41.3 billion. That's 2%, and gross profit for the 9 months was 10.3 billion. Right. So in terms of profit, it's typically in tiers. You have gross profit, operating profit, and then net profit. Now you want to look at each stage of profit to see how the company is doing. And so it's all important, and that's why it's typically included in the summary. Right, so the Jamaica operations reported a segment result of 3.1 billion, which was 694 million or 29% above. So this, in this case, this would be above the 2020 year. The COVID-19 pandemic adversely impacted their Jamaica operations as we have seen a decline of 4%, right? So we're gonna see what they say about that in this year's report. All right, so they're saying, however, they were able to do a 29% improvement over the prior year, improving on efficiencies and continued enhancing of their customer relationships. On the US side now, they reported a 10% increase. That's 1.1 billion over the previous year. And that was driven by, increased poultry and feed sales. And for the Haiti, they actually reported a segment loss of 23 million compared to the prior year. And total revenue would have increased by 26%. And let's see what they're saying here. And effective November 1st, 2020, the group would have acquired an additional 13.48% in the Haiti Broilers SA, increasing its shareholdings to 85.48%, right? And I figured I would see more information on this in the annual report, but as I said, we're not going to go through that today. All right. So finance costs for the group showed a reduction. That's good. And implementation of their diversification strategy has yielded positive results, including the strengthening of their various markets of economies, and they're steadfastly praying for the well-being of all their stakeholders and remain committed to ensuring continuous supply, right? Okay, cool. So let's see what we're seeing here. So we're looking at the income statement for the 9 months ended January 30, 2021. So as I said, we're looking at the previous years, and then we're going to look at the current years shortly. All right, so in this case, I'm just going to focus on these two columns, these two to the end. And what we're going to do is just kind of look at the highlights, right? So for 9 months, they had, we saw this before, 41.3 billion in terms of revenue. And we know it's billion because we say 3 zeros here, right? So hopefully you're able to follow what I'm showing you. So let me actually just kind of highlight it. So this is the part that we're looking at here, right? So it's saying that, and it's comparing it to the previous year. So they did pretty much about 800 million more than the previous year in terms of revenue. Cost of sales seem pretty close in terms of the same. So I'm guessing that those margins, if we were to do that analysis, would be close. And then we saw where gross profit was 10.2 billion for the 9 months ending 2021. All right, so let me just escape out of that and scroll. So operating profit would have went from 2.2 to 2.9 billion, and profit before taxation went up. That's pretty good increase, 2.4 billion from 1.4, and ultimately net profit, which is what we're looking at, is 1.8 billion, up from 1.1 billion, right? So this is where they were last year, right? Let's actually scroll down. I'm not going to spend too much time on the rest of this here because we want to use, of course, the most recent information, but we're just going to look at some key things on the balance sheet. So on their balance sheet, we're seeing, let's see if there's anything that stands out to us here. So property, plant, and equipment would have increased. Right of use assets, intangible assets down slightly. Investment property more or less the same. Investments have doubled. And deferred expenditure, income taxes, and post-employment benefits are more or less in the same region. In terms of current assets, their inventory went up by about 2.1 billion. Their biological assets would have went up by 500 million. Their receivables went up seemingly a little bit over 10%. And cash and short-term investments would have went down. So would look to the cash flow statement to see what that would have been invested in, or what expense would have led to that decrease. And in terms of current liabilities, their payables are down. Taxation payable is up. Borrowings would be up by 1.3 billion, and their lease liabilities would have decreased. And let us scroll to this is now where they're showing just that statement for changes in stockholders' equity. Now, sometimes you may want to look at this, just in case there's any significant change here. But essentially, this is just showing the state of the equity within the company. It's not something that we're going to spend a lot of time on in this video here. All right. And the cash flow that we definitely want to look at. So it starts with the net profit. So this net profit is coming from the income statement that we looked at earlier. So that's always the starting figure. Then there are adjustments made for three types of cash flows: operating activities, financing activities, and investing activities. And then it's going to show the net cash position at the end of the period. All right. So we see the depreciation, amortization would have increased. Now that's just really based on the type of assets that are there. Typically, you're not going to see that information in this quarterly report, but you may see more detail in the annual report. There was fair value gain on financial assets at fair value through profit and loss from 15 million to 46 million. Taxation expense that would have increased. In terms of inventory, that's from 1.4 billion to 2.0 in terms of expenditure. Biological assets, receivables, payables, etc., taxation paid. So these would have been, areas impacting cash flow in terms of their operations, right? Let's see the next set. So investing activities. So this would be money in terms of spend, so to purchase, property, assets, etc. So that's what we're looking at here now. So they have purchased assets here, purchase of investments, proceeds of disposal of assets, and interest received, cash used in investing activities totaling 2.1 billion. And as I said, it's thousands here. So everything here that says million is really billion. All right. Let me take a brief glance at the questions here. Journey with Bantu is asking, okay, I'm going to answer that at the end of the video. All right. And next, financing activities. So this would be no cash flows that go out or coming through financing activities. So long-term loans being repaid, 3 billion. Long-term loans received. All right, so we definitely want to see more detail on this. Again, we're not likely to see it in this report. So we would now have to look at the annual report for 2021 to see the details of this long-term loan. but likely there would have been some announcement to say would have taken out this loan from X company for X purposes, right? But that's stated here. So this is why it's showing positive, because it's cash that would have come into the company, shares purchased, dividends paid, etc., interest paid. Something that I like to note here that let me zoom in a little bit here. If it's fuzzy for your paper plate, I'm not sure why that is. It seems, pretty clear for me. Maybe you can change the resolution of the video. Sometimes it's not set to 720p or higher, so maybe try setting it to a higher resolution and see if it appears a little better for you. So one thing that I like to highlight here is dividends paid is an expense to the company and an income for investors. And then ultimately net cash would have been pretty much the same, right? 100 million or less, maybe about 40 million more in terms of their cash position. So it stayed pretty much the same. Let's go quickly to the Q3 now for 2022. Right, so that's what we're looking at here. So let's see how this compares to the previous one last year. All right. So it's saying, let me zoom in here. So you notice right off the bat that the way that the report is presented is not always the same. If you notice this screen versus the first one that we looked at, but that's okay. Typically, it's the same amount of information, and they may highlight just key things that they want you to see. All right. So the 9-month performance of the group was commendable despite their Jamaica operations reporting a 6% decline in the segment profit when compared to the prior year. All right. So let's go back to this previous one, and let's see how they would have done or said coming into this year. Right. For the Jamaica operations, they would have done an increase, right, 2% above the previous year, whereas this year they did a 6% decline. Now this may be, well, it actually says it's here, and this decrease was attributed mainly to the increase in grain prices and international shipping costs. Right, so the fact that it's mentioning increased grain prices here, we have seen earlier this year that with the conflict, there's a suspicion of increased cost of grain. So this may continue to impact them because this would be for the quarter ending, coming into this year. So this may also impact them for the final quarter. And we saw last year where many companies were simply just reporting an issue in terms of growing shipping costs, right? And those costs ultimately impact the company's bottom line, right? So it increased production costs, all of which were not passed on to their customers, right? And sometimes you'll see this where the company will consider, well, if we increase our costs, then it goes to the distributor, which may ultimately increase the cost of goods and services for the end customer. Now, of course, that's something that you have to watch carefully because a company will have to manage its profitability, right? So net profit for the 9 months amounted to 2 billion. That's a 9% increase over the corresponding 9-month period. And the US operations was the major driver for this performance with a 111% increase, right? So we did see some growth in the US operations last year. That was a 10% increase. Now it had 111%, right? So that's excellent in terms of the US operations. And group revenues for the 9 months amounted to 55 billion, a 33% increase above the 43.1 billion achieved. Their gross profit for 9 months was 11.8 billion, a 15% increase over the previous year. However, their gross profit as a percentage of sales declined from 25% to 21% when compared to the prior year. So the decline in gross margin is primarily attributable to the increased input costs, which was partially mitigated by the significant growth in the US business. So what this is saying is that the US did so well that it compensated for some of the losses they would have incurred, and it was able to pretty much level off the performance. Right, so the Jamaica operations, that was 2.9 billion, which was 176 million or 6% below last year, and total revenue for Jamaica showed an increase of 29%. All right, so you're seeing here to the right, it's showing year-to-date segment profit. We're seeing US compared to Jamaica, and so that's what. So you saw that drastic growth in the US side. So that's definitely an area that seems is worth noting, and you may want to watch as it moves forward, because it could potentially mean that the US could outgrow Jamaica in terms of performance based on what the data is showing there. All right, let's see what it says about Haiti. Haiti reported a segment loss of 10.6 million compared to the prior year, and we saw similarly last year that there was a segment loss here again, 23.3 million, and this was 23.3 million. You'd think you are looking at the same report, right? Total revenue reduced by 36% as they continue to experience economic and political instability. So that is saying the main reason why Haiti is performing poorly is because of this, and if those factors change, it could result in a change in performance. All right, so these are the highlights here that we will see pretty soon. All right, so this again, we're going to focus on the final two. Just a reminder, this is the income statement for 9 months ending January 2022, and we're going to compare it to what we saw last year. All right, so revenue, that's the top line here, grew from 41 billion to 55 billion, and we saw the highlights of that earlier. But if you notice, ultimately gross profit was pretty much 1 billion more, right? So that speaks to, of course, the things that they mentioned, the increase in costs, shipping, etc., would have accounted for it. So if it was not for the growth of the US operations, they might have done worse than the year before, In terms of operating profit, that's a second tier of profit I would typically like to look at. This would have gone to 3.4 billion, up from 2.9. And typically we want to look here to see what would have led to a major increase or decrease here. So the gross profit was higher. We saw where admin expenses were higher, up almost 20%, well, more than 20%, but ultimately they still have more operating profit. So all things considered, net profit now is 2 billion as opposed to 1.8 billion. Right, so they did, which looks like almost a 30% increase in revenue, but ultimately net profit is maybe about 10% higher than it was the previous year, right? And then we see earnings per stock would have grown from 1.77 to $2.04. That's good to see overall. This is the balance sheet now that we're going to look at. So we would have seen, let me see if there's anything worth noting here, because we would have seen this before, right? So we're just looking for anything that stands out to us that we want to highlight. Not seeing anything worthy of note right now. Receivables would have grown. So receivables for the company is a good thing. Well, growing receivables, do I want to say it's a good thing? Let me not say that. It's an increase. It means that there is more money owed to them. Typically, if it grows too much, you want to see if there is any future bad debt, if it is that all the customers don't pay. Let me say it that way. So I don't want to say it's a good thing. Please take that back. Cash and short-term investments, more or less the same. Overall assets would have increased by 4 billion. right? Payables remained more or less the same within the 9 billion range. Borrowings would have increased by 1 billion, and taxation payable increased as well. So let's go to cash flow statement because we want to see what would have happened to cash, right? Cash flow from operations. Well, of course, we start with the net profit that's coming in. Depreciation is there. Debt forgiveness, right? So 584 million in debt forgiveness, right? So remember we mentioned that before, that you want to look to see things like this, right? Deferred expenditure. Let's see here. Interest expense. All of those resulted in impact to cash flow from operating activities. Inventory, not as much spent on inventory. Biological assets, receivables, etc. Payables, and taxation paid. So ultimately, they still ended up with net positive cash in terms of operating activities, as opposed to the previous year being negative 233 million. All right. Next, investing activities. So investment in property, plant, and equipment, purchase of intangible assets, proceeds from sale of investments, proceeds from disposal of property, plant, and equipment, and interest received resulted in negative 1.8 billion. This is normal though, because this means that money is being spent to either improve operations, purchasing of assets, etc. So this is normally 9 out of 10 times going to be a negative number. Then cash flows from financing activities. Long-term loans repaid, so would have seen an introduction of long-term loan for the previous one, so that would need to be paid. Long-term loans received, that's 6.8 billion, so we saw that on the previous one as well. Shares purchased, interest paid, dividend paid, etc. All of that happening led to essentially a similar net cash position. So with everything that they've done, all investments, payments, purchases, etc., would have led to 3.3 billion in cash at the end of the period. So ultimately, they are in a similar position. Of course, you actually would want to see growth based on how great the US operations did. But of course, we are in a pandemic, right? So right here, they have segment reporting information, right? So this is breaking down for Jamaica, US, Haiti, and other Caribbean countries. And it's showing you that breakdown, and which led to the overall figure, which would have seen in the income statement. And then this would be the sub. So this seems to be for 2021 exactly, because I was wondering, this is not the 55 million that we're used to. Okay, so what they're showing here is the breakdown for the previous year, right? Let me see if there's anything else worth noting. I like this breakdown though. It shows you how the different segments are doing that make up the overall company. And let me see if there's anything else. Okay, no, so that's it. So let's actually go to the next phase of the analysis, which is typically, looking at how the company has performed on the exchange. All right, so we're looking back on the Jamaica Stock Exchange website. This is the instrument summary. As I said, the link will be in the description of this video. We search for the company, and it shows us the summary here. So from the start of the year, it would be at $29. It ended today at $27. So it's really down 4% year to date. So it's pretty much, it's seen, let's actually go back to 3 months here. So it saw a low of $26. Yeah, around $26. So this seems a little bit more drastic than it really is. but more or less it's been somewhere between $29 and $26. So that's $3, right? That's not really dramatic in my opinion. In the last 6 months, it was high as $32 and still the same low of 26.53 in terms of volumes. In December, it saw 1.5 million units. In January, 1.6 million units. Let me see. These dates are typically based on dividend announcements. We're going to look at that soon. And mentioned these highlights before. So in the 52-week range, it's been as high as $37 and as low as $25, right? And so the reason why sometimes you'll see this is that the price you're seeing on this chart is not the same as a price you'll see on the candlestick chart, where it may show us that for this day, let's see. So on March 16th, it had a low of 25.51, right? So sometimes on the day it may trade lower than the price that you see on the line chart here. So just bear that in mind, all right? Let's see any news that is out about the company. So on March 22, they advised that a connected party has sold 73,134 shares, sold 43,367 shares on March 17. We saw the results that we looked at just now. On February 25th, a connected party has sold, so some selling taking place there. For the last 3 notices, there was a declaration of dividend of 31 cents. Let's actually check out this a little bit more. Oh, I like this. So it says that, based on their 1.1 billion issued shares, the total amount of dividend that is proposed is 371 million, and the record date was Friday, March 11th, and the payment date was Thursday, April 14th. So the payment date is coming up in about 8 days, and it would be for shareholders on record from March 11th. So the reason why I say I like this is that they're showing the amount being paid, right? That's not something that you always see. And so that would have been what would have happened recently. So nothing really major. I like to do a web search as well to see if there's anything that is worth noting. Let me actually stop sharing just in case I open a tab and I see something and you see something that I don't want you to see. But I'm just essentially doing a web search for any news, right? All right, so I'm going to add that back to the stream here and just zoom in. So typically, if you want to see news about the company, just type in the company name and news, and you'll see this news section that's there. So this was released 3 weeks ago. So usually reports like this would be speaking to the report that came out, and we saw these highlights already. So it's saying year-to-date profit propped up by US operations, and that's what we saw, because the US operations did 111% better. So we saw that the year-to-date profit was in fact being held up by that, hit with increased grain and shipping costs, right? So that actually is one way that you can see that sometimes the news that's being reported, it's on the same report that you have access to. If you read the report, then the news story, everything that you see in it will make sense. So this is going to speak to the thing that you want to look at from here, is just in case there's any additional information that was not in the report. At a first glance, I'm seeing that everything is what we would have seen already. I'm just looking to see if there's anything no. So there's nothing new in this that we would not have seen in the report. US fried chicken comes to Jamaica. Let's see this one. So US fried chicken franchise comes to Jamaica. US fast food franchise Bird Shack will open in Jamaica next month. When was this released? In March. Okay, so it should be opening in April. Let's see the impact for Jamaica Broilers, right? Because that's what we're trying to see, that connection. I'm definitely not seeing it, so I'll zoom in because you probably can't see it either. I'm just doing a quick read to see what the impact or our relationship is to Jamaica Broilers. 10% increase in chicken prices was applied by producers. Okay, so it's just speaking to about cost for chicken. Okay, I'll still link this article and go through it. I'm not seeing, apart from that mention of price, not seeing a direct correlation to Jamaica Broilers, even though if it is another player in that market, another potential client for Jamaica Broilers, but then a new competitor could mean just the same amount of business being distributed across all franchises. Doesn't necessarily mean more revenue, but let's see, right? Ministry on bird flu watch. Okay, that's not something that. Okay, so this was something that we saw earlier in the year when there was a discussion about whether or not there was a shortage of chicken. So KFC released something that says there was a shortage, and then Jamaica Broilers released something very shortly after to say there is no shortage, right? So that's what this post is about. So JBG is saying that there is no shortage. KFC was saying that there is a shortage, right? And that's pretty much what the article is saying. Let's see if there's anything else. Okay, so this was from last year. So one of the things that Jamaica Broilers has done, right, we see where they have operations in Jamaica, Haiti, US, and some other countries. One of the ways to do that is through acquisition, right? So it's saying that they have backed out of an acquisition here. Let's see what the story says. Okay, so they were going to do an acquisition, decided to turn it down because the process was complicated. That's what it's saying. Let's see if it mentions, okay, Poultry Limited, September 29 was since rebranded. This goes actively pursuing opportunities and was going after the assets of Simply Essentials Poultry Plant, right? So this seems to be the company in question. And okay, closed operations August 2021. The assets of the company were placed in a bankruptcy auction with Pure Prairie Farms Inc., a company that had a supply arrangement with Simply Essential and JBG Sub conducting business. So let's see. Okay, that would have been interesting. Seems like it wasn't able to work out. Okay, they made an offer. Okay, so I'm gonna link this article as well. This definitely seems worth noting. Not seeing anything else that, well, so they spoke about political conflict in Haiti. This seems to be speaking about it, right? So based on that, they've limited Haiti operations, and we've seen where for the last two Q3s, there have been a loss of 23.3 million in Haiti. This is, I guess, speaking to why, or a part of the reason why. Okay, cool. All right, so that gives us some insight there. Is there anything else that we want to look at? Let us see how it traded today. Let me actually, it's the last piece that we can probably look at here. Okay, we're making good time. Perfect. All right, let me know if you have any questions about the review that I've done so far. Post them in the chat and I'll get to them soon. So yes, Imran, I mean, that's how we do these reviews. We try to see if there's anything that relates to the company that is being reviewed. And it is a way to think about the impact of the company on an industry level. So remember phase one that we mentioned in our Stocks for Beginners class, right? You want to look at the company, climate, and the competition. So anything related to chicken, poultry will affect Jamaica Broilers. That's the business that they're in, right? So just bear that in mind. Okay. All right, let me share my screen again. So we're looking at ticker JBG on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. So the open price today, $28.12. Last traded price, $27. 36,000 units traded today. Low of $27, high of $28.80. These are the orders that are in the queue as at right now. This may change tomorrow morning. And what we're seeing here is trading history going far back as 2017. So in 2017, it was $15 in January, and it's all the way up to $27.83 as it was today. So it went to a high of about $40. And actually remember when it was making this run. And of course, naturally, that's just the way the market works, right? So there is 14 orders to buy and about 46 orders to sell. And of course, we're seeing orders, let's see, on the buy side, we're seeing orders. I mean, this really not a lot of volumes, but I mean, of course, that may change very quickly. Last trades, as we saw, it's really been trading between the $26 and $29 range. Of course, any major news, any significant changes in terms of the company's position can change that at any moment, but I like to look at that to see how the company has been trading. All right, so I think that would be it for the review. So went through the Q3 report for 2022 and 2021. We looked at the income statement and balance sheet and cash flow statement. We look at major news for the company. We saw where there has been impact to the operations due to increased costs. The US operations have actually been growing. So if it's able to maintain that pace, at some point it will start to provide some more room or growth in profit, assuming that things on the Jamaica side will start to improve with now the removal of restrictions, right? Because this latest report would have still been at a point where there would have been an impact to know what we consider normal operations. So as industries are now fully opened, there may be a change in terms of their Q4. And their Q4 has, their last, if we go back to 2019, let me actually share my screen briefly again. But 2019, their Q4 was really good, right? But of course, the last 2 years would have been significantly impacted. So based on what we saw for Q3, of course, this does include the growth in the US operations. So let's assume that Jamaica is able to perform the way that it was in 2019, and the US continues to grow. Though there are losses in Haiti, there may be a great improvement for Q4. They're already ahead in terms of their net profit for the year. So if they're able to do anywhere between so the average of these 3 quarters, 10, 2, and 7, so that's 17. Let's say about 600 million. If they're able to do 600, I think they would still be able to outperform what they did the previous year. So that's something that you'd want to look at if you're a shareholder in the company or a prospective shareholder. Of course, everything that I say here, you want to look through the lens of speaking with your financial advisor before you make an investment decision. I'm simply just sharing information here. All right. Okay, great. So let me go through any questions now to see if I can answer them. Paul is asking if Jamaica Broilers is good for scalping. I really can't answer that question, Paul. I wouldn't know what to say. Kari is saying that this is why I love them, their values. I mean, that's definitely something you want to look for in a company, values that you can relate to and that you agree with. Let me answer that question from Journey with Bantu now. What do I use for dual recording of your screen and your webcam? So I'm using a platform called StreamYard. It is something that if you're interested, I can send you a referral link. And essentially I do have, I can connect multiple cameras and multiple screens. It's a very simple setup. You can use your built-in microphone. You know, maybe this is not best to talk about here, but if you're interested, just reach out to me on Instagram. I'll share my setup with you and I can help you get started if you need to. All right, so everyone else was just saying good night. All right, guys, so thank you so much for checking out this video. If you're interested in learning about, you know, how to review companies, quarterly reports, annual reports, and just the basics of investing, we do have videos to cover that on our channel, so feel free to check that out. If you've been watching this whole time and you found value, please like the video. It helps us greatly. We tried to have this on all our platforms, not just YouTube today. So I want to thank those who are joining us from LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Really do appreciate it. Feel free to join us on Telegram. We talk about investing daily in that group. If you need support, you need to find information, you need to know where to go to get, you know, access to the tools and resources to become a better investor. That's what the group is about. It's not about financial advice. We're not going to tell you what to buy. That's not our job. Our job is just to provide a safe space for you to learn, grow, and invest. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.